Okay guys, welcome back to today's lesson. Let's get straight into it because today might be a little bit longer and a little bit more challenging. So I want to make sure we get this done in the hour. So title today is question 4, your date and your learning objective. Also, if you hear that I'm out of breath, it's because I just ran up and down the stairs in the English block. Oh my God, I'm exhausted. All right, pause the video and get this down for me now, please. Okay, so now you're ready to do our do now, which is copying these sentences and correcting any spag errors, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Pause the video, copy and correct these now, please. Okay, you should now be in a position to make your corrections. So, number 1, this part in the middle is a parentheses, additional information. So you can use brackets, dashes, or commas to separate that. And it's also missing a comma. A full stop at the end, sorry. Number 2, a comma is used to separate the subordinate and the main clause, and writer doesn't need a capital letter. Number 3, it was originally a comma splice, so you can use semicolon, full stop, or conjunction. Number 4, again, a parentheses, so any of these pieces of punctuation. And finally, a comma used to separate the subordinate clause and the main clause. Always remember that the main clause makes sense on its own. So pause the video now and make any corrections that you need to. Okay, so let's look at question 4. This is the final question for section A before we move on to section B, which is question 5. So this question will always ask you to evaluate the text using a statement. You might be confused. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And this is AO4, assessment objective number 4. This question is worth 20 marks, so quite a substantial amount of marks, which means you need to spend about 20 minutes. Remember, by this stage, you would have already read the text once at the beginning of the paper, and then also kind of reread sections of it for question 1, 2, and 3. So at this stage, you should be in an excellent position in terms of your knowledge of the fiction text. Question 4 will always look something like this. The student, having read this text or section of the text, said, and then it will include a statement. For example, the writer brings the very different characters to life and makes you feel they are real. To what extent do you agree? So the key words kind of in this question are the to what extent do you agree? It's indicating that there could be opportunities where you would disagree. Not always, but it's hinting that may be the case sometimes, and we're going to look at that idea shortly. So, how do we actually approach question 4? Again, I would like you to get these tips down, so pause the video and get this title for me now. Okay, so you can use evidence from earlier questions in question 4. The examiners will mark each question independently. They will not use any of your previous answers to dictate what they give you for the current question that they are marking. They will mark them independently based on what you have written for that question. So you can use evidence from earlier questions. You can analyse language and structure. Again, you can draw on some of the things that you have used earlier in the text, but obviously the analysis will change because it will be geared to a different question. You must only focus on the statement. It's so important that you're talking about whether you agree with the statement. And a lot of this comes from making sure you read the statement, reread it, and reread it again, so you are fully aware of what you are being asked to agree or disagree with. And draw a box around the lines. Often it will be quite a large section, but again, it's really important that we are focusing entirely on that section. So pause the video and write these tips down now for me, please. Okay, so you should have got these written down. So let's have a look at the checklist for this question. So you want to start off your paragraph, instead of a point, you want to say why you agree with the statement. And here are some things that you can use to start that off. So I agree that, for example, and then you would want to talk about the focus of the question. So what is the statement actually asking you to agree with? And then you want to write a reason in your own words as to why you agree or disagree with this statement. You then want to use embedded quotes, as always. And then you want to talk about devices, language, structure, methods, and analyze that in a lot of detail, specifically focus on how it supports the statement. Then you want to make a link between different parts of the text. And at the end, link back to your original point to talk about what you've analysed and how that supports the statement. So you probably noticed that all of the questions are kind of similar structure, but the content of those paragraphs depend on the question. So we are going to get lots and lots of practice, but it's really important that you gear your answer to whatever the question is asking you to do. And as this is a 20 marker, you want to repeat this step 4 times. Okay, so 4 paragraphs for this. Okay, so let's have a look at a example from Whitefang. I'm going to model a few paragraphs for you today, and then you're going to produce one on your own before doing a full question 4 response on propping up the line for me tomorrow. So focus this part of your answer on the second half of the source, from line 17 to the end. The reader of the novel said, "This section of the text where we learn what happened in the struggle between Whitefang and the intruder makes me feel desperately sorry for Whitefang. To what extent do you agree?" The examiner will always give you some options of things that you can include. You don't have to include them, but it's nice to kind of look at their guidance. In your response, you could consider your own impression of what happened, evaluate how much the writer makes you feel sorry for Whitefang, and support your response with references to the text. So at this stage, I would make sure that I've highlighted the lines, so 17 to the end, and I'd also make sure I highlight the important parts of the statement. So it's talking about the struggle between Whitefang and the intruder, and if that makes us feel desperately sorry for Whitefang. And then again, at this stage, you would want to draw a line around a box around the lines that the question is asking you to focus on. Like I say, we can't do that if it's a document. It might be worth highlighting it when you come to doing it for propping up the line. But for this example, I have just copied and pasted it onto this slide. So this is the focus of my question 4. So I've already read this at the beginning, but I am going to read it again. So pause the video now and just take a second to read this, but make sure you're thinking about how the writer is making us feel sorry for Whitefang, and also if there's any room to disagree with the statement that the writer makes us feel desperately sorry for Whitefang. Okay, so you should have read this section now, and this means that we are ready to start writing. So I am going to model a first paragraph for you. All right, so I've started with firstly, because I'm about to say why I agree with this statement. So I'm going to initially agree with the statement. It's really important that you understand that the examiners aren't going to give you a statement that is false. They don't want to trip you up. There will always be room to agree. Okay, so I'm going to write firstly, I agree that this section of text and the focus of the question is about feeling sympathy for Whitefang. So I agree that this section of the text makes me feel sympathy for Whitefang. Because, and then I need to write an idea in my own words. I'm going to write because he seems negatively impacted by the struggle. Simple. That is my opening section done. Okay, now I need to use quotes, and I'm going to embed them as we always do. So I'm going to start with when. When describing White Fang, after the attack, the writer describes, and I'm looking at the extract. Right at the bottom, it says describes his weak growl and his drooped eyelids. Okay, that is my quote done. Or my quotes. Remember, it's always nice to have kind of short bursts of quotes that you can easily analyze. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to identify what I'm going to analyze, what I'm going to focus on, and then talk about what that suggests and how that supports the statement. So the use of the, I'm going to say, drooped and weak are adjectives. I'm going to requote them. Weak and drooped suggests that White Fang, and I'm gonna talk about if your eyelids are like drooping, it's like you've got no energy, so it suggests that White Fang has lost all of his energy. And kind of, if he's weak, that means he's fragile and has become fragile as a result of the attack. If I stop there, my analysis isn't linking to the question focus. It's not telling me how White Fang losing energy and White Fang being fragile makes me believe that, makes me feel sympathy for him. So as a result of the attack, which evokes sympathy, creates sympathy, as it just seems like he has no strength to do anything anymore. Like, he can't even keep his eyes open, as it seems like he has no strength to even keep his eyes open any longer. Okay, and just notice how much room that takes up of my paragraph. So I've done this step here. Okay, now I need to do my link. So the idea that I'm going to use the reasoning as to why I agree with the statement. So I'm going to change it up a little bit and write the idea that White Fang has been weakened, because that's why I'm saying I agree with the statement, because he's weak. From the attack is seen. I'm going to do the quote flatten out at the bottom of the extract. So I'm going to say is seen later when, and then you want to re-embed a new quotation in the same way, when the writer describes his body as being flattened out on the floor. Again, I could leave that there, but I briefly want to analyze this, so I'm just going to write which emphasizes, I'm going to say his fatigue, which is his tiredness, and his feebleness. Again, another way to say that he is weak. Okay, that is my link done. And then my final step is to talk about what the writer is overall trying to show the reader of the text. So I'm going to write overall. You don't have to use overall, you can switch it up. The writer creates, the focus of the question is sympathy, always linking back to sympathy. Sympathy for White Fang as his formerly strong self has been reduced to like nothingness, or almost nothing. Okay, so that is my first paragraph for question 4. So now what I would like you to do is open the document that is titled Question 4 Model, and you'll see the checklist on the right, and you will also see this model paragraph. What I would like you to do, as always, is match the checklist up with this paragraph. It's important to notice at this point that I am still agreeing with the statement. I'm still arguing that this section of the text makes me feel sympathy for White Fang. So pause the video, go to question 4 model, and highlight and match these up. Okay, if you're back, that means that you've got these highlighted, you've got it matched up. So let's go through it quickly together. So we have the why I agree with the statement, this bit here. Furthermore, it may be argued that sympathy for White Fang is evoked because of his loyalty and love for his family. And notice at this point it's a different point. I haven't repeated myself, it's a completely different, unique point. My next step is my quotes. So that is when describing White Fang's master's reaction after attack, the writer mentions how Whedon patted him, which causes White Fang to give an acknowledging growl. Again, remember that I have used 2 short quotes and they're not next to each other, and that's completely fine. Next up, I'm going to do my identifying my devices, and then I'm also going to explain the meaning. And for that, I've written the writer's choice to describe this event from the point of view of the owner. This is a structural piece of analysis. Highlights the owner's pride and gratitude for White Fang's relentless attempt to protect him, even though it has evidently made him weak. That last bit there, after the comma, is very important because it's linking to how that makes us feel sympathy. And then we have my link. And for that, I've written the idea that White Fang loves his family is seen earlier when the writer describes his vain effort to wag, which emphasizes his inability to greet his owner due to his fatigue. And again, I have linked that explicitly back to why that makes me feel sympathetic. It's really important you do that, especially from this point of view, because if you're talking about the loyalty and the love that he has for his family and that his family have for him, it's almost shedding a positive light on the situation, but the point is that he is still weak as a result, and we feel sympathy for his efforts to protect his family because they have made him so weak. And then finally, we have the writer's overall idea, and for that I've written, therefore, the writer creates sympathy for White Fang as he has fought so hard and so bravely to shield his owner. Okay. Pause the video now and just go to the model and double check that you've got everything highlighted exactly in the way that you see on the screen now. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to move on. So we've done 2 paragraphs. Now I'm going to model for you a 3rd paragraph. And the reason I'm going to model another paragraph for you is because I am now going to disagree with the statement. But let me make myself extremely clear. There may be statements that you cannot disagree with, that you will write 4 paragraphs of agreement to. But there are some statements that you may look at and think, actually, I kind of disagree with that. And that's okay. There are no set expectations of how many paragraphs you should write to agree or disagree. You can write 4 to agree. You can write 2 to agree, 2 to disagree. You can write 3 to agree and 1 to disagree. Like I said earlier, there will always be agreement with the statement. They're not trying to trick you up, but there also may be an interpretation you have that counters the statement. That is also fine. So you've seen the 2 paragraphs for agree, and I'm now going to show you how to disagree with the statement. Again, not always necessary depending on the statement, but it's important that you understand that it is an option for you. So let's have a look at this together. So I've started this time with contrastingly because I'm about to contrast my earlier paragraph that agrees. So I'm going to write, contrastingly, it may be argued that. And it's important that I've used the word may here because I'm talking about a potential. I'm not saying that it's definite. I'm saying that there might be scope to argue with a statement. So that this section does not make me feel sorry for White Fang. So again, I'm talking about the focus of the question, but I'm shifting it by saying it's not making me feel sorry as opposed to making me feel sorry for White Fang. And now I need to write my reason, as it highlights the violence of the attack. Remember, you can use the same ideas, the same quotes, the same points as you did in earlier questions, because we looked at the violence of the attack for question 2. It doesn't matter. They're being marked as separate questions. So that is my first section done. Now quotes. So as always, when describing the impact of the attack, the writer, make sure you put a comma there. You all forget to put commas there. The writer conveys how the intruders, and I'm going to use gurgle, became a whistle. That quote from White Fang is one of the hardest ones to analyse, so I want to show you how to do it. Okay, so that is my quotes done. Don't worry at this point if you're not sure why I've chosen that quote, it's going to become very clear. So now I'm going to analyse the most important step. So I could write the words, however, the words gurgle and whistle are examples of onomatopoeia. An onomatopoeia is when the word sounds like the sound that it's describing. So like crash, bang, crackle, whiz. The same applies for gurgle and whistle. So I'm going to write here it's the worst word to spell in the world, onomatopoeic sounds create a disturbing image because, now I need to explain why I think that, it implies that the intruder has had a chunk of flesh bitten from his neck. So in the extract we see White Fang digs his his fangs into the man's neck, and that indicates that kind of a piece of flesh has been removed. Therefore, when he is trying to kind of breathe, it creates this like awful kind of whistling sound, because like maybe his voice box has been damaged or something. Okay, so I'm going to develop this a little bit more precisely. Now, this is an excellent discourse marker to start a sentence with because it shows that you are really about to unpick a piece of language in much more detail. More precisely, the word gurgle creates an impression that he is finding it hard to breathe, like I just explained to you. And this indicates how, we'll say vicious instead of violent, how vicious White Fang can be. Again, that's important because I'm linking back to why I'm disagreeing with a statement, because White Fang is actually very violent and we shouldn't feel sympathy for this violent dog. That is my analysis done. Very detailed, linking back to the question, everything explained. Now my link. So the idea that White Fang, linking back to the reason why I'm disagreeing with a statement, and that is that he is violent, and I'm going to add and brutal as well, change it up slightly. We added that White Fang is violent and brutal is seen later in the text, and then embed a new quotation when the writer describes the way in which the intruder's noises died down. Obviously, at this point, I've already read the extract and decided and highlighted which quotes I'm using, and that's why I'm writing this, so quickly. Implying, again, I could leave it there, but for extra analysis marks, I'm going to explain it very briefly. Implying that he is dead or unconscious. He's gone quiet, he's not making those sounds of pain anymore, so maybe he has actually died or become unconscious from the pain inflicted by White Fang. That is my link. And then at the end, my overall message. So overall, again, you can switch that up. The writer creates sympathy more so for the intruder. Now that's really sophisticated because I'm actually shifting the statement to fit my interpretation. For the intruder than White Fang here, because it seems like the intruder's like a lot worse off than White Fang after the attack. Like there's a hint that he might actually be dead. So I think it's better off maybe to say that we actually feel more sympathy for him. That interpretation also has merit, as the intruder seems detrimentally, we'll say, impacted by the attack. Okay, so at this point we've had 2 paragraphs to agree with different points, and then we've written 1 paragraph to disagree. Now it's your turn. So you're going to use the checklist to write a final paragraph for question 4. And this can be agreeing or disagreeing with a statement. Remember, you may not always be able to disagree. You may be able to only find one reason to disagree. That is fine. So you can choose at this point your point of view. So you may wish to analyse the intruder's scream and his pain. There's a lovely quote about that in White Fang. But you also might want to talk about White Fang kind of panting and his struggles. And an interesting kind of challenging piece of analysis would be a structural analysis of the way in which the text ends. By focusing on White Fang, we are left at the end with the description of White Fang and what impact does that have on the reader? What does that resonate in our mind? What does that allow us to finish the text actually thinking about? So go now and complete the final paragraph. After you have done that, you need to make sure you send me your work on email. I can't express how important it is that I see these paragraphs so I can mark them and give you feedback in the coming weeks. Please make sure that you're using a different reason. Don't just repeat one of my ideas that I used earlier. It's not allowing you to practice appropriately, okay? If you need to, you can rewind the video and look at the model again, or look at how I have written the agree or disagree paragraph, and you can write along with me. Do whatever you need to do to make this paragraph excellent, and then send it to me when you have done. Okay, have an excellent rest of your lesson, and I will see you in the next video.